You guys want to have an awkward conversation?
Sure.
Yeah?
Julie, you really never give me a choice when you make me come on this podcast.
We're here.
You chose to be here, Hannah.
We're sitting here right now.
I know. I just always say yes.
Yeah. So are you all ready to have an awkward conversation? Because we're going to talk about having an awkward conversation today. We're going to talk about how do you talk about sex? So in marriage, how do you talk about sex even like if you're dating? That's where we're headed today. So thank you all for joining this podcast with me. I'm Juli Slattery, and this podcast is an outreach of authentic intimacy, which is helping people make sense of God and sexuality. In the studio with me today, Hannah Nitz, a favorite of the podcast. Welcome back, Hannah.
I've done many an awkward conversation before.
Yes, you have.
So I'm ready to do it
You're
again.
back.
So before I introduce Josiah, what do you think was the most awkward conversation we ever had?
Definitely the episode on masturbation.
Yeah.
Like that. That one is a ringer. But I just was mentioning earlier, the other one was when it was me, you, and Joe Caruso, which is someone I knew but hadn't seen for, 10 years. And we were talking about what's okay in the bedroom. Yeah. It's just harder when there's a boy around. It's easier when it's just me and you. But you keep inviting these boys.
I know.
One of my leaders at our church one time, we were doing a group, actually through one of your books, Julie, and he was leading it. We called it sex group, just as like a joke, but it was like 10 weeks or whatever. And somehow there was a week about masturbation, and none of the other guys showed up. So it was this one leader and all girls.
Oh, no.
And I was like, dude, he did it. He powered through. I'm like, bro, that's where you call it and you get out of there. But
absolutely
not.
Yeah, that's not a good idea.
No, it was a horrible idea. Yeah. He told me, I'm like, what were you thinking, dude? But, at the same time, you have to admire his courage.
Yes, for sure. So, Hannah,
when you fake a fall.
So, Hannah, I don't know if this is going to make you feel better or worse, but that is our number one downloaded episode of all time. So
the masturbation one?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a correlation between awkwardness and download.
So I don't know if we can make this one really awkward.
I'll
you don't
see what
know.
I can do.
Yeah. So Josiah, thanks for joining us for this
me.
awkward conversation.
Thanks.
You are just kind of a newer contributor to the podcast. Glad to have you.
Thanks for having me.
And you are a young adults pastor at a nearby church, husband, father of a couple little ones.
Yeah.
So you ready to jump into this?
Yes.
Okay, so let's start with the fact that most married couples, and again, we can get into dating, but most married couples don't know how to talk about sex. Which, does that surprise you guys?
No. based on the people I'm talking to, the nature of these conversations, the way I feel right now having this conversation, it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, Julie, I mean, I've been on, this podcast with you over the past 13 years. And I've just in you even asking that question, like I've definitely had more conversations with you
and 10,000 other people.
This is confession
and the
time.
Audience about sex than I have my own husband.
That's crazy.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
That's bad. But I think for that very reason, like the only reason I'm having it now is because you're making me.
Yes.
But in general, like even within marriage, there is this piece. And it doesn't have to be this way, but I think for many of us that it just feels hard to talk about at times.
Well, you got to imagine any kind of tension that comes in. I would imagine, you're the expert, that this would be the first conversation out the window. Like if there's any kind of conflict or any kind of I would imagine this gets way shelved because you're looking for any excuse not to have it.
That's probably true. I mean, it's just so awkward, like talking to married couples, they don't even know what words to use. Like, how do you bring up the fact that, for example, you're not happy where things are in your sex life? So it's just...
We should make a Yelp review app.
No, you think so?
Just kidding. That's horrible.
Probably not.
Probably most often when it's being brought up, it isn't like, hey, I just want to tell you that everything is going awesome with this area. There's usually some sort of issue.
There's a problem.
Or that you're trying to bring up or talk about, which always adds to the awkwardness. It's easier to say, I don't like how you're loading the dishwasher.
Right.
That's just a harder piece to bring up.
I get mad about that too. So
we do have opinions on dishwashers.
But it's not as vulnerable. And that's the other reason why I think a lot of people don't know how to talk about this issue in marriage is because they're afraid of saying something that is going to bring up a bigger conflict or is a deep wound or is going to expose shame.
Yeah, Julie, so we pulled a little bit of data for this coming into this episode. Two of your friends who you've had on before, Dr. Michael and Shanti.
Yeah. Yep.
They've been on this podcast and they work to create this like nationally represented study of these conversations and these topics, as opposed to us just being like, oh yeah, I don't know, it seems like it. They got the numbers. So they discovered that 73%, which, you know, we could call that 3 out of 4 couples, said that they don't talk about sex.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a whopper.
That is.
3 out of 4.
It's significantly higher than I was thinking.
And the data says they avoid it because it's awkward. So there we go. High rankings here.
Mm-hmm.
Or because they think it won't get them anywhere. Yet the same survey data overwhelmingly showed that talking about sex was highly correlated with a more thriving sex life.
Right.
So it's this fear that we don't want to talk about it because it's not going to be helpful. And then the data is like, actually,
is that true?
Really
is that true? Like why would people, because I'm assuming looking at this stat that this is a person, obviously it's many people, but this is a person that has tried to bring the subject up. Mm-hmm. It didn't help and didn't move forward and probably turned into a fight.
Right.
Not talking from personal experience, but you know, that's what that must have been what happened.
Right.
And then they're like, is it true that most people bringing it up, it doesn't go anywhere?
Very often. And I think some of it's what Hannah already sort of alluded to is usually when we bring this conversation up, it's because there's a problem. And sometimes it's like you're not at a good place to have that conversation. And so you try to bring it up, or maybe it's even in the heat of the moment. It's like everything sort of comes out in terms of how you're feeling, and it ends up being awful. So who wants to go back to that conversation?
So if it's highly correlated that I should be bringing these things up, before we even get into any of that, what do you think is the proper situation, proper scenario that these conversations should be approached?
Yeah, proactively instead of reactively. So if you take any conversation, like you even take a conversation about parenting, and the only time you ever talk about parenting or discipline is when things are going really bad. How's that going to go?
It's like your husband just put the kids to bed and it didn't go great. Right. And he like comes downstairs and you're like, so let's talk about how we do bedtime.
Right.
Like it just happened.
And you feel like a failure. If you can't get the kids down, you already know. And I don't need you telling me.
Right. And not even let's talk about bedtime. It's more like, why did you do this? And don't you know we're supposed to do this and that? So typically when a conversation about sex is raised in a marriage, it's because I'm not happy, something went wrong, I discovered pornography on your phone, something like that. And so if your only experience as a couple is having reactive conversations when you're both very activated emotionally, then why would you ever want to revisit that? So when you say, what's the best way to do this? Proactively is very different in terms of, hey, like, I want to work on this part of our marriage. Like, not just I want to talk about what's wrong, but I want to learn what this is like for you. Like, how do we grow in oneness? That's a very different conversation than kind of debriefing after something went horribly wrong.
Or what's worse is sometimes I would bring things up right before, where it was like I was picking up the vibes of like, we might be going down this path. And then I would be like, I feel like we need to talk about, and it was like, Hannah, read the room. Like, this is not the time to talk about this.
Right.
The thought of it being this like proactive, not in the moment, I want to have this intentional conversation with my spouse sounds so much better.
Yes.
But again, the reality is 3 out of 4 couples still
don't do it.
Aren't doing it.
So to be more specific, because I think there's a lot of people probably as dumb as me listening to this right now.
Josiah.
Yeah. You're talking about not before, not after. Right. So that to be super specific. Talk about like tone. What is like an opening sentence? You know, no matter what the topic's about to be, what's the successful version of this conversation?
Well, I was listening to this podcast, and no, I'm teasing.
Okay, just send them this episode.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I really think that's why a lot of people will listen to this podcast, because it's a conversation starter. And I've heard so many stories of people like, yeah, I had my husband listen to this, or we listened to it together on a road trip, and you got to bring up the conversation instead of me feeling like I have to. So that's not a bad strategy, but because it is really awkward. But I think apart from that, when it's just, I would encourage you to pray about it because God always knows better than we do the best tone, the best timing. And you do want to look at tone and timing. So tone needs to be not, I'm going to tell you what's wrong, or I'm going to tell you what I want you to change. Tone needs to be invitational. Like, I care about this area of our marriage. Like, I care about you. Maybe you're in a place where you both are like, yeah, this isn't going well. And you can say, we don't know how to talk about sex. We don't know how to deal with just what it even looks like to have a healthy sex life. Or maybe things are going pretty well, but you want them to go better. And just even throwing that stat out. Like, do you know that over 70% of married couples don't know how to have healthy conversation around sex? And if we did, then actually it would improve our sex life. Like, that's invitational.
Yeah.
And then, so that's the tone, and then timing is huge. So I know I've brought up this topic at the wrong time, especially early on in marriage. Where,
well, it seems like there's never a good time.
Yeah, that's kind of true. And that's where you kind of even give your spouse the opportunity to choose the time. Like, hey, sometime I love to have a conversation with you about just how do we invest in our sex life? Like, how do we learn to talk about it? When is a good time for you? And they might say, I don't know. And you're like, all right, well, I'm
booked until.
They might say that, but it's like, hey, can I circle back around with you in a few days and see how they respond? But usually it's like, okay, how about when we go out for our date on Friday or.
Yeah, because that's the hard thing about any difficult conversation in marriage at all is when you want to bring it up the most is normally in the heat of the moment, which is normally the absolute last time. But then the other thing that's going on in the back of your head is I don't want to ruin date night or a positive moment that we're having by dropping this bomb on you right now. I like that idea of like, hey, oh man. But then there's this, okay. So when I was in high school and I got a text from my girlfriend that was like, hey, we need to talk.
Yep. That's not a good, that's not a good lead-in.
So how do you set up the conversation in the future that's not that? If it's 48 hours from now, those aren't going to be like looming 48 hours.
No, it's so true. And that goes back to tone. So I feel like any of us, when your spouse wants to talk to you about something, especially something serious, you assume the worst. And the first thing going through your mind is, what did I do wrong? What am I going to be criticized for? And that's why, I think that tone and setting it is in terms of, hey, like we've been married for 10 years or whatever it might be. Like, I'd really like to, just as a couple, explore, like, how can we grow in this area of our marriage? Or we got kids running around. We never have energy for this or time for this. Like, what would it look like for us to be intentional about this area of our marriage? Yeah. And so even in the invitation of the conversation, you're saying we team, let's go towards like flourishing and a goal, not I got to talk to you about a problem.
This is so good. This is like any difficult conversation advice right here too. Because one of the things that's been helpful for me, at least, is to realize my tendencies to ruin conversations. Like if you were to confront me, if Hannah was to confront me right now and stab me emotionally.
Or just like hand you a bowl of sour cream.
Yeah. We're talking. I do not like sour cream, just for context, which would really stress me out. But my tendency when I feel insecure is to get angry. That's my tendency. Sarah, my wife's tendency when she feels insecure is to shut down. And so we move in the exact opposite direction because I'll just get more aggressive and she'll get more passive. And that's kind of how things move. So I have to walk into conversations literally being like, don't get angry. I have to tell myself in advance. But I've learned that with that, I have to have the self-control of no matter what happens, this is the tone I'm going to talk in. I can catch my little ticks before she does that. I'm like probably elevating, so I need to keep that down. But then with her, I've learned no matter what we're talking about, her brain is probably going to go to certain places. Like you're going to accuse me of this or you're going to come after this thing that really... And so I've learned to lead with compliments in those exact areas so that she knows that those things are going to be safe. Like I'm not going after how much you love me. I'm not going after anything like that. But we're going to have this conversation down the road. But what you're talking about, tone, that's just so important because I'm the king of messing that up for sure.
Well, hey, we all are. And even when you say like you get angry, she tends to get quiet, you're both being triggered. And so some of it is what is so triggering about a conversation about sex, and to have the personal awareness of when I have this conversation, my trigger might be I'm going to feel criticized, I'm going to feel unloved, I'm going to feel shamed. Understanding your spouse's trigger. Why is it that you withdraw? Why is it that you immediately would go towards feeling criticized? Like having that awareness paves the way for this kind of conversation, as you're saying, to be proactive about making sure that you're encouraging each other, even praying before a conversation like this. And I joked about it, but a lot of the conversations that my husband and I have had over the years on this topic have been sparked by a third party, like a podcast or a book or hearing a sermon or going to a marriage conference, because it feels safer for someone else to initiate the conversation than for either of you to do it.
You're like, I didn't bring this up.
Yes.
Julie brought this up.
Yeah.
So
I
let's
just
talk
made you
about
listen
it.
to it.
Yeah, just like, I got curious listening to this. I want to know what you think listening to it.
Yeah, I fear this is going to show my cards a little bit if I'm in the 70% who don't talk about it or the 30% who do. But even in having this conversation, I'm thinking, what would we even talk about?
Yeah, what are the things?
Am I asking? It just feels, even the thought of what we would talk about, I'm really good with words.
Yeah.
I'm good with conversation. I think you could set me here with your son who's really into games and I don't know that much about games, and I could hold a conversation. There's something about even just having the right words and language. So let's say, hypothetically, Julie, if I was in more of that 73% and was saying, I do want to bring this up.
Yeah.
I do want to have these conversations. What am I even asking? Do you think we're having enough sex? Is that where I'm starting? Or what is what should we be saying?
All right. Well, how about if you run through 5 conversations that are good to have about sex? Would that be helpful?
That would be
Let's do
really
it.
helpful.
All right.
Are
Okay.
you saying there are unproductive conversations? There's topics that
yeah.
would just not be helpful?
I wouldn't say there are topics that wouldn't be helpful, but the way that you approach them can do more damage than help.
Yeah.
But I do think there are conversations that couples don't have about sex that help everything.
Yeah.
So, for example, one conversation I think is great to have about sex is, what does sex mean to you? In our sex life, what does it mean to you? And it's some people would be like, why is that even a question? Because there are a lot of people for whom sex means you see me, you love me, you notice me, I'm beautiful. For a lot of guys, if their wife is not responding to their initiation, they feel less loved. They feel less of a man. It's tied to their masculinity. And so getting underneath, what does the language of sex mean? It's not just an action. Like I said earlier, it's triggering something. When it goes well, it's triggering good thoughts and feelings of connection and feeling loved, feeling valued. When it's not going well, it can trigger, I feel unloved. I'm afraid this person is going to leave me, or maybe they don't like the way I look, or there's all this subtext that we often never get to or even realize in ourselves.
For someone that might not have the language to express what it means or doesn't mean, are there not to be stereotypical, but are there kind of archetypes where it's people generally perceive it in one of these 5 ways or in somewhere in between?
Well, let me give you just a few words.
It's
Okay,
the
so
5 love languages.
Yeah, I'm yeah, totally.
yeah, I mean, there's
I'm not the Enneagram of
there you
sex,
go.
but
Yeah,
kind of.
that's like a new book to write.
Yeah, there you go.
So, there's the obvious of pleasure. This is something that I look forward to. This is something I like. It can be connection for both men and women, even because of the hormones and the neurochemicals that sex can release in our bodies. It can create that sense of being connected. On the negative side, it can mean a duty or an obligation. A lot of women in particular can feel this way. This is not something I look forward to or want to do. It's something I feel obligated to do in our marriage. You want to know that if your spouse is feeling that way. Procreation, particularly if you are in the stage of marriage where you're wanting to have children, you're battling infertility. In that season, sex can become all about almost okay, this is the right window for ovulation, and like you lose sort of some of that fun and spontaneity. And so couples that are going through that need to be able to voice that. Like I feel like we've lost connection. This is just about trying to make a baby. Reassurance, validation, that you still love me, that you believe I'm beautiful or handsome or desirable. That sort of thing would be a lot of what I hear. And love in general. Like I just think in our society, we've often replaced the need for love and intimacy with sex. And so even in marriage, you can start to think, wow, like my spouse isn't pursuing me. Maybe they don't love me anymore. Maybe there's something wrong with me.
Yeah. For the person that would primarily experience something that would be negative or perceived as negative, how are they supposed to communicate that in a way that doesn't just feel like a slap in the face to the other person?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, first of all, not blaming, like not you make me feel like this is an obligation or you make me feel shame or anything like that, but more like, yeah, I think because the way I was raised or even...
Yeah, blame your parents.
You could do that.
Everything's your parents' fault.
Your
I'm a young adult pastor. Everything is your parents' fault. You've never done it. It's your parents' fault or it's your condition.
Or it's your pastor's fault.
Yeah, it's your pastor's fault.
Like
Not that you've never done anything wrong.
I heard this sermon on 1 Corinthians 7, and ever since then, I felt like it's an obligation or a duty.
It's always somebody else's fault.
But I do think we come into sex with so much context before we ever meet our spouse. And then there's new memories that are being formed, some positive, some negative. But I think just even starting with, I'm not blaming you for this. Like, I know your intention isn't to make me feel this way. But often this is how I think about sex. I think about it as something that I have to do or something that you need me to do. And so that's going to be a hard conversation. But it's one worth having because if you don't have it, then you've got all those feelings and thoughts that you have nowhere to go with.
And I imagine as we're like having that conversation, this first question that you're starting with is not practical. Like it isn't how many times are we having sex? It's a step before that.
Right.
Of what does this even mean? I think that kind of conversation is going to hopefully open up a tone where you're not stuck in the weeds of, I don't even know, logistics.
No,
like
and that's so key. It's
Yeah.
because that's where couples usually want to start is one person thinks that you're not having sex often enough and the other person thinks that it's too much.
Yeah, I've done enough conferences with you, Julie, over the years where people text in their questions. And whenever it's a marriage conference where the husband and wife are in the room, I mean, that's the question that I think gets texted in the most often is, how often should we be doing this?
Right.
And I think when we think about having a conversation on sexuality, it's tempting to just go to something like that. So this first question you're having of, what does it mean to you? It's a good one.
It's curious, and that's what we want to foster is a curiosity about our spouse and even about ourselves. Because most of us have never thought, what do I attach sex to?
Man, and the longer you're married, curiosity is less frequent.
Yeah.
Because you have your rhythms and you're decades in and it's easy for curiosity to die down.
Right. Very true.
So I like that within this question of that curious spirit in it,
So here's a question that really gets at some of what you were talking about is in terms of frequency. Another way of approaching this, how do desire, initiation, and rejection work in our marriage?
Woof.
Yeah, you don't like that one?
It's a good one. I mean, that's, again, not just how often are we doing it.
Yeah.
You are asking something a little more nuanced of those very important words, because if rejection is something that either of you have experienced within your sexual relationship, it's giving you that space to talk about that. What other words did you say? Initiation?
Desire, initiation, and rejection.
Can you break down what you mean by each of those?
Okay, so desire is the actual yearning to connect, to have sex. It can be like some people can have a desire for the intimacy. Some people can have the desire for just the physical act. Initiation is who is prompting, who's the one saying, hey, how about tonight?
I saw a Shark Tank episode one time.
Man, what a follow-up
This
to that.
is crazy.
I'm very curious.
This is going somewhere. I saw a Shark Tank episode one time, and the pitch was each couple, like on each side of the bed, there's a button.
Yeah.
And if
No,
only one
sir.
of you pushes it, it doesn't light up. But if one person pushes it, when the second person pushes it, it lights up. And now you both know.
Okay,
That's what I thought.
Okay, so that's a really bad idea.
You wouldn't
I'll
back
tell you
that
why.
product.
I'll
I would
tell you
love
wh-
to hear the name of that
okay.
product though, because I
don't
bet they have such a creative name.
I bet you
The
they're
marketing mind.
I
in
bet
me.
they're making good money on
Okay,
that.
but they got something wrong in that.
Yeah, okay, talk about
Here's
that.
what they
Listen,
got-
Josiah,
here's
if you
what they-
ordered this product, don't tell
I
us.
do
There you
not
go.
have it. I would like all listeners to know I do not have this product. But you can look this up on YouTube.
But if I were on the Shark Tank, here's what I would say based on what I know about the research here. Some people have initiating desire when it comes to sex. And so that's the individual who is thinking about sex more often and more likely to push the button. About 70% of the time, it's the man who has more of that initiating desire. Often, people, particularly women, will have receptive desire, which means they're not thinking about it at all. But if you start talking about it, if their spouse initiates and gives them sort of the right prompts and time to prepare, they do want sex. They do have desire. So the problem with that product is the person with the receptive desire wouldn't even think about it until they saw the light go off. So that's key.
Yeah.
Because if you are the initiator and you're like, why am I the one pushing that button? And my spouse never is, it's because that's not how they're wired. So those are the kinds of conversations that couples can start to have to say, wow, why am I the one always initiating? I feel like the pressure's on me. And then the other person to be able to say, well, yeah, I just don't think about it. But, like when I think about it and when we're spending time together, this is something I do desire.
Right.
But that helps you work out a system that really is going to work for you as a couple.
Right. And you talk about in all your books and all, like the goal, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but the goal is to love the other person and to experience love together. And so if you kind of have the schedule that's always, or you got the two buttons or what, those are all ways of getting rid of the communication and the level of emotional intimacy you would need beforehand to even love the other person well. Am I saying that right?
To some extent.
Okay.
So couples that would schedule sex, which I think for a lot of couples is actually a good idea. You have to communicate to even figure out how do you schedule it? How often? Why is this important? Why is this something that we don't want just to fall off the radar? And actually, if you schedule sex, you end up having more time to have discussion. It's not rushed. It's not this sense of one person wants it, the other person really might not be into it. So it's not the schedule that's the problem. It's the fact that couples aren't talking about, again, what these things mean to them. So let's say you have a woman who has an initiating desire or higher desire, and she's always kind of giving the hint that this is something she wants to do, and her husband is never in the mood. What does that feel like for her? Like what self-doubt does she have? What does she wonder about her marriage or what her husband's thinking? Maybe there's fears there, like what if he's looking at pornography and he's just not interested in me? What feelings does the husband have? Where it's like, wow, the culture's narrative is that guys should always be ready, but I'm not. What's wrong with me? And I feel pressure now every time my wife initiates, or it could be the opposite. And so when couples can really get into having that level of conversation and reassure each other and figure out a rhythm that works for them, that's when you really start to be just in a flow of intimacy instead of all these unspoken things happening.
So if I were to say on stage right now in front of the young adult ministry that I lead, that Juli Slattery, the expert in this, says scheduling sex is a good idea, for sure the thought would be romance is dead. Yeah. Marriage is horrible. Like that, it seems like you've taken all passion and everything that I learned on Summer I Turned Pretty completely out of. Yeah. What would be your response to that?
So my response to that would be, do you think it's a good idea when you're going out with somebody if you schedule dates? Like get it on the calendar.
For sure.
Or you just wait until hopefully you and your friend both
show up. What would
happen
if you never schedule dates? Like as much as you might want to be with each other, would you end up spending less time or more time with the person that you want to be with? And would the time together be better if it was scheduled or not?
It's true.
And it's like, well, of course schedule, because Like, I've got this time blocked out to be together, and I'm going to actually take a shower and put on deodorant and like think about what we're going to do and plan and put some creativity into it. And the same thing is true with sex. Like, when you schedule it, you're actually saying, I'm prioritizing this. I'm not going to let anything else get in the way of this. We're going to make sure the door's locked on the bedroom, the kids aren't around. We're going to make sure, like, it's not rushed. I can put thought into it, the way I want to look, what we're going to do, the conversations we can have. So it ends up actually being more romantic.
It's interesting. That makes a lot of sense. That is just very, no, everything you're saying makes sense. That is very counter to, that never happens in the movies.
No, it doesn't.
The timer never goes off in the movies. It's like,
Yes.
It's steamy. They're both into it. The music
Yeah.
turns on. And I think that that's most people's perception of, I think that's probably what leads into any of these questions to begin with, is like, if it's not like that, hot and heavy all the time, spontaneous all the time, something's wrong with us, because
Okay.
that's the only thing we've ever
And
seen.
in the movies, it's always the first sexual encounter or the second or third.
You're not
it's
seeing couples who've been married for 20
no,
years.
and you're not
on
even
screen.
seeing couples that have been dating for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
It's just that new relationship of what's going to happen and the tension. And so Hollywood plays off of that, and it's just not real life. So you're right, though. There has to be a reset. So we talked about, having a conversation about what does sex mean to you, a conversation about desire, initiation, and rejection. Let me give you a few more ideas of how to talk about this. Here's a good one. How are you experiencing our sexual relationship in this season? What do you think about that question?
So you're saying right now. So this gets beyond broad.
Right.
This is what I came into our marriage with. This is like, we're talking like this window
Yeah.
of time.
Right. What do you think? Good question.
I mean, that's definitely, again, when we were talking about this, I think where I would have started.
Uh-huh.
So I like having some of these other questions leading up to it.
Right.
And once those are established, having more space to then get into more
Mm-hmm.
of that logistics and also maybe satisfaction.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Right.
we're not giving it and maybe we would give it a 1 through 5 stars.
Yeah, back to the Yelp review idea. You guys didn't think that was a good idea, and here we are, circled right back. Julie Slattery endorses the Yelp review idea.
I didn't say it. She said it.
I endorse it.
Yeah.
But, however the dynamic is in your marriage on how you talk about things, as silly as that is, like a playful way or a serious way to be able to say, what is your experience within this in our marriage right now?
But are you asking about satisfaction? Or is that like one of the things? Are you just asking about, I don't know, like if someone just lost a parent, obviously they're going to be interpreting romance very differently in that.
Right.
What are you, I don't know, what are the types
What are
of
you
dynamics?
actually getting at with that question? I think you could even say it differently. Like, how do you think things are going in this area of our marriage right now?
How's it going for you?
Yeah. And this is actually a question that my husband and I will ask each other frequently. Like, how do you think things are going in this area? And it can be frequency, like, wow, we're just really missing each other. Like, we're just busy. Like, we haven't been intentional about this part of our marriage. Sometimes it'll be, we need to really pray about this more. Like, we've even praying about it and talking about it has sort of fallen off the radar. Sometimes it is satisfaction in terms of, how do you think we can grow? Like one of the things that I've learned over the many years of being married is often in church, when we talk about married sex, we only talk about morality, like keep sex within marriage. We never talk about maturity. Like, what does it look like when you're married for 20 years to be more mature sexually with your spouse than when you were married 10 years? And so that vision of how are we knowing each other more deeply? How are we growing? How are we caring for each other better than we used to? And so this kind of how are things right now is not just an evaluation of 1 to 5, but it's also, where do you want to grow? Like, where do you see that we really can lean into loving each other better? And even just the reality of, like you said, losing a parent, being in grief, struggling with infertility, aging bodies, medical issues. Like, how are we doing with that? What adjustments do we need to make? What do we need to grieve together? So that question really prompts some of those.
Well, that should be very encouraging for anybody that's maybe skeptical about marriage in general, about the Christian sexual ethic, because it seems that our culture says, find somebody that's sexually compatible, So you get the steamy thing at the beginning. But then what happens is over the course of time, that just declines. Right. And if you were to ask the average 40-year-old couple, 60-year-old couple, pick your age demographic, you would see a decline in satisfaction in that area. Mm-hmm. What you're saying is this is a question about, and actually the Bible not just gives permission to, encourages that your romance should be increasing over the course of your marriage, which is completely countercultural and exciting. So everybody listening, you get married, I guess. That's good.
No, it's very true, but we haven't fleshed out what a roadmap for that looks like very well. Mm-hmm. And that's, the work that we do at Authentic Intimacy is, okay, what does it look like to grow in sexual love over the years of marriage? And how should, after you've been married 35, 40 years, like you look at the newlyweds and being like, okay, they have nicer bodies, but like they've got nothing on us, like what we've been able to build.
Well, they don't have the connection.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
we need the Yelp review.
There you go. Are you not going to give up on that, huh? All right. Okay, so just a couple more conversations. One is, what expectations and sexual stories did each of us bring into marriage?
Okay, this one, the question I get probably the most when I'm working with, so almost everyone that I work with would have not grown up churched, come to Christ as a young adult, and then just now trying to figure life out, which includes marriage. One of the most frequent questions I get is, should we talk about sex when we're dating? Should we talk about our sexual history? Because I can't think of the last wedding I did where they didn't have some kind of sexual history.
Sure.
What do you think is the answer to that?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I think, and then you tell me what you think.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, I think, first of all, in dating relationships, you should definitely talk about sexual boundaries early because sometimes they're assumed and they shouldn't be assumed.
Yeah.
So that conversation needs to happen very early in a relationship of, just so you know, like, these are my convictions. This is what I'm going to ask you to respect in our relationship. Do we agree on that? That sort of thing. Because like in Christian dating world, it doesn't matter how old you are, whether you're single or single again, there's just a lot of like caving on this issue of,
for sure.
Hey, I've already had sex. Why does it matter?
Right.
So you need to have that conversation out of the gate. And then in terms of sexual history, I think that, the first few months of dating is really just getting to know each other. It's just having fun together and just basic level of who are you as a person and do we click and, just doing life a little bit together. Then you start to get into maybe a season of dating where you're trying to see, is this somebody that I potentially could have a long-term marriage relationship with? And so in that stage, I think it's appropriate to high level to tell somebody like, hey, yeah, like I've had a lot happen in my life, or there have been things I've struggled with, or there are things that I'm currently struggling with. And then the question is, are you getting help? Do you have the accountability you need? That's all you need to do at that stage of dating.
Okay.
It's just high level.
High level.
Right.
Everybody listening to this, high level.
So, and the reason you do this is, first of all, so that it's not out of the blue, so that when you get to like an engagement or pre-engagement stage, you feel like this is such a big deal and you never even let me know that this was there. But then you don't know them well enough and you don't have a commitment enough to go into details. And there's a good chance that you're going to go your separate ways with this person. And so be careful how much of your history you share. I think there's a tendency sometimes to overshare. Then when you get into, we are thinking about getting engaged, like we are really starting to get ready to make that commitment. That's when I think having the deeper conversation, even with a counselor, a pastor, a mentor, about, hey, before you consider marrying me or we talk about this, there's some things you need to know. And here, is maybe abuse that I've suffered. Here are, like in high school, college, I had a lot of sexual relationships, those sort of things. Again, not detailed, because I don't think detail is usually really helpful. I had 3 abortions, those sort of things your potential spouse needs to know.
Can you go more into detail? Can you be more specific about the details that you talk? Because typically what happens is somebody starts getting insecure and they want to know who. Yeah. And especially when we're talking about like body count, people you've been with in the past. Yeah. And in our like in my context, I mean, people are coming to Christ as friend groups, which
Mhm.
means your fiance is finding out that you
Mhm.
slept with her other friend
Right.
and they didn't know about that. And,
Yeah, that's
or they
messy.
all get saved and there's other people in the church that
Yeah.
you've been with. Like how detailed is helpful, and when are you crossing into like this is unhelpful now, and
Yeah.
you're just asking these questions out of insecurity?
Right. So the first thing is, I think it's always wise to never answer those questions in the moment.
Mm.
So you need to have permission to say, let me think and pray about it. And that gives you the time, if you're not meeting with a mentor together, to go ask a counselor or mentor and really think and pray about it. Because every situation is going to be different. And particularly if you're talking about young adults, I think having an older, wiser third party navigate some of that is huge. Because let's say you do say, yeah, it was this person who was in our friend group or small group. Well, then what do boundaries look like for that relationship? And what does the other person do with anger or rejection or insecurity? And most young adults are not ready to handle that heavy of emotions themselves without kind of hurting each other or self-destructing, or, the one person going to the friend and like, why did you sleep with that person? So, and I'm sure you've seen all that unfold.
Well, and then what happens a lot of times is they keep asking for more detailed questions. So it's like, who? And then it's like, how many times? It's like, what'd you do? Like they get like really specific.
None of that is helpful. And those questions get to two things. Number one, I'm afraid that I'm not going to measure up. There's an insecurity. And number two, I don't know if I can forgive you. And so those are the two questions you need to deal with is, what does this do to me in terms of being insecure in the relationship? And second of all, can I forgive you? Or is this something I'm going to constantly hold over your head? And so that's where, again, a wiser counselor and mentor can help you actually get to the pain point that's causing you, because you're never going to get enough information that's going to answer those two questions.
To feel satisfied.
No.
Yeah. Now, when you cross over into, because the heart of this question is, what am I bringing into marriage? So when that couple crosses over into marriage, do any of those details now become important? Should they be on the table? Or is that kind of a...
I think if there's things you never shared with your spouse, you need to share. And not details again, because it doesn't help anything. But if you're like, wow, we never had these conversations before we got married, and there's not just details, but back up, what's more important is what stories are you bringing in? Like there are people bringing into marriage the story of, I grew up in a very conservative church. I had one sexual relationship and have been punishing myself ever since. I really don't know if God ever would forgive me. Or I grew up knowing that I shouldn't have sex outside of marriage. And so I've never really been able to get past that and enjoy sex in our marriage. Like, so it's not just sin stories. It's what's the narrative?
Right.
I saw my dad cheat on my mom, and that makes me really insecure that you're going to cheat on me someday. It's not just confessing sin. It's really more, like what stories impact me.
Juli, as we're like having these conversations more, Josiah bringing in some of these concepts around pre-marriage conversations, engagement, these different stages. I think of, even how we started this conversation of the awkwardness. And even Josiah saying like, there's pieces of that even before you're married. And as we're talking, there's pieces of that for people who've been married for 40 years, that still feel that awkwardness. I was just thinking, listening, whether it be back when you're dating, whether it be 40 years down the road of marriage, it also adds some maybe ammunition or pain when you've tried to have these conversations before and it hasn't gone well. It's like you kind of mark it in your brain of like, yeah, I tried, didn't go good. And I'm thinking of that person listening to this who's thinking, oh, that's nice, but it doesn't go well when we do this. My spouse completely shuts down, or this has caused so much conflict for us. Yeah. I don't know. I was just thinking of that, listener, as we're talking about this.
Yeah.
If it's been a past pain.
Yes.
What do you even do with that?
One of the things you can do is just name that and just be like, hey, like, whenever we've tried to have conversations about sex before, I feel like we both end up feeling hurt at the end of it.
And then your spouse will be like, yes.
Yeah. And
I agree.
It's like, and so we never talk about it.
Yeah.
We don't know how to talk about it. And that really kind of leads us to the last question I think couples should be talking through is, where do we need to get some help and support? Mm. And very often in marriage, in a topic as vulnerable as this one, you can't initially navigate it well by yourself. And so that's where, at the very least, reading a good Christian book together on sex is going to give you a framework and language.
I know a really great author.
Got some good recommendations.
I know a number of really great authors. Yeah. So there's lots of options out there. We can put some options in the show notes. But start with that. Start with podcasts like this one, where, again, let someone else, and Mike and I had to do this early in our marriage, let someone else give you the vocabulary and the parameters of how do we have a constructive conversation about sex. And then consider counseling. Consider meeting with a Christian marriage counselor, even a Christian sex therapist who might be really comfortable and informed in this area of marriage, particularly if there's issues like pornography, addiction, abuse, like things like that, where you need some knowledge and expertise.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to do that. Like, there are so many people struggling with those issues and so many people that have gotten help because they had the courage to seek it. Don't feel like it's a failure if you need to reach out for help, because we all need that at some point.
I'm trying to think of a couple. Can you give a couple maybe mile markers that, because if you're in a relationship, that's all you know. Mm-hmm. And so whatever's going on between you and your spouse, or like, you don't know what's happening, in the house next door. Mm-hmm. What are some checkpoints that you might give to say, we have gone past, because I'm the kind of person that wants to figure everything out on my own, and I'm not trying to bring other people in. We've gone past the place of, we can just work this out and we need to love each other and read a little bit more or whatever it is. And we probably need to talk to somebody else. Yeah.
So, and this is true in a sexual relationship, but anything in marriage, if you cannot have a conversation about it without it becoming conflictual and hurtful, that is a number one sign that
ding, ding, ding.
That's really good. That's really helpful. Yeah.
And that's when Mike and I, even being married 32 years, if we keep having the same conversation and we cannot resolve it or it ends in a conflict, we're like, all right, we need to reach out to a counselor because we need a third set of eyes on this. So that would very much be true. If you feel like you can't bring it up, if you're afraid, like, I'm afraid if I brought this up, like, things would get really ugly really fast. Then maybe you just need to go to a counselor first yourself. So that would be it. Again, if there's abuse in your past or your spouse's past that impacts you. And so having expertise, addiction, certainly, if there's a pornography or sexual addiction, I think affair recovery, couples do not recover from that on their own. They really need outside help. So those are the kinds of things.
That's very helpful.
Sexual pain, physical pain, or emotional pain that you can't get rid of or get through. Those are the kinds of things.
It's very helpful.
So I was trying to think, if I take all my years and experience of marriage, I was like, how many topics do Caleb and I need to regularly communicate about and talk about? It's a long list. We just went through back to school with all 3 kids. There was a lot of conversations about that, or the logistics, or all those things. Like, I don't know. Say in a given year, there's 100 things that we need to talk about, things in our home, decisions we're making together, all those things. Just a little quiz for you guys. How high up would you put
that's a good question.
Sexuality?
Where does it get on the Yelp review, right?
Yeah, we're going back to the reviews.
Yeah.
So if it's like, you need to talk about it, but you'll get there eventually, you would put it at number 100, like it's at the bottom of the list. If it's like, listen, if you're not talking about this sometime within your year, it's not going to be good. It's number 1. Like, we need to have this conversation. Where are we putting this at?
I put it at top 5.
Whoa.
That's high. Out of 100.
And here's the reason why, because
that's higher than I was anticipating.
Sex is never a neutral issue in a marriage, ever.
That's very true.
It's either something that is fun for you guys and a connection point in an area you're growing in, or it's something that's going to tear you apart through resentment, bitterness, temptation, affairs. Like, so If you look
So
at it
better
that
be
way,
in those top
I mean,
5
how many things are never neutral in your marriage?
That's really interesting. And it's one of those things too where the distance between conversations is doing a negative.
Yeah.
It's not doing which is not true about the
Yeah.
dishwasher.
Yes.
For most people. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know. The
Yeah,
on the person.
The back to
Yeah.
school stuff. It's like
Yeah.
we could have gone through all of that without having too much conversation about it. And at the end of the day, one of us would have still gotten our kids back to school. But this area, if you're not having these conversations, as awkward as they feel, and for the 73% of the listeners who are not having it, it's so important.
Yeah, I mean,
Top
this is
5.
one area of marriage that is one of the greatest predictors of marriage happiness
Wow.
and stability.
Wow.
Is how satisfied are you with the sex life?
Wow.
So if it's that important and you're not talking about it, you might think everything's fine, but your spouse doesn't.
So buckle up, dear listener.
Yeah.
Let's
There
have
you
the
go.
conversation.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
Shoot your spouse a text right now and say, "Hey, we need to talk." ... That's it.
Just send them this conversation.
If there's one thing I learned today, it's that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we do want to recommend a few resources for you for follow-up. If you want to start with a book, you could start with my book, God's Sex in Your Marriage, as a book that kind of gives you a roadmap of what a flourishing sex life and marriage looks like and how do you work towards that. But also we got lots of resources like blogs, other podcast episodes at our website, AuthenticIntimacy.com. And guys, thanks for having the awkward conversation.
You know what? It wasn't that bad.
It
we did
wasn't
great.
that bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Julie.